The world of theater is full of stars. But just like in the night sky, sometimes we don't see them all. Some are in the wings, some are maybe up over us in the catwalk. Hopefully they're not under the stage, but you never know. In this series, we are going to meet those hidden stars of the theater, hear their stories, and be inspired by them. So join me on this journey here in my state-of-the-art production studio in my backyard as we meet the hidden stars of theater. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Hidden Stars of Theater. This is your host, Jamie Davis, and we're here again, as always, in my camper in the backyard. It's such a good time, and going to have a great time today as we have a new star to meet, Heather Augustine. And Heather is from the wonderful world of audio engineering, and she has some great stories to tell us. And man, you guys are special as well, and it's so great to have you as always. But we've got nothing today that we have to distract ourselves with other than Heather, which is good because she's the star of the day and she's the reason we're here. So we're going to jump right into this. So I will just begin by saying, hey, Heather, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being our guest. It is awesome to have you. Always a privilege to have such wonderful people here hanging out in the camper with me. And we got to get the air conditioner fixed though, or people are going to stop hanging out with me. But yeah, actually we have a surprise coming up very soon. We have a new camper. Well, I say new, Heather, but it's really 10 years older. It's an older camper, but it'll be new to us, and it has an air conditioner.
Yeah. Hey, that is a benefit, especially in Oklahoma in the summer.
That's exactly right. I like to say it's the closest I'll be to cool. But that's okay. I was a band kid and a theater kid, so
we're
happy
all
with
nerds.
That. Yeah, and that's a good thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, very good. Well, Heather, as I said, it is great to have you, and I'm excited to hear your story and just to learn from you and everything. So let's just jump right into it. And as you know, I know you've seen some of the program. A lot of these people on the Wall of Wisdom are your friends, and you've gotten the privilege to work with them, which is really cool. And so what we do is we want you to start from the point in your life where you begin to have things and people and events just influence you towards this wonderful world of theater that we all love very much, and just kind of tell us about you and who you are and all the way up to today. So from Heather, maybe you were born performing, and if so, that's a great place to start. If not, you can jump forward a little bit. That's totally up to you. So I will tell you that it is your turn, it is your stage, and you are now the star.
Love it. Well, currently, or if we were on tour, I would be the head audio on the Mean Girls tour, but
cool.
Going all the way back to not quite birth. We don't have to go back quite that far. But basically, since I was little, I loved reading. As pretty much as soon as I learned how to read, you could always find me in a chair with a book, and to the point where that was my punishment from my parents. If they didn't ground me, they would just take away my books, and it got to the point where I had too many, and they were like, "Just don't read, just please."
I wonder how many books they would have had to take away before it was considered child abuse. Can you imagine the judge saying, "Now what?" What? How? What?
I'm pretty sure when they got to the point where that was the punishment, any judge would have been like, "Yeah, you're fine. Go, just
get out.
You're fine. Yeah. If that's the punishment we're dealing with here, you're fine."
That's funny.
Yeah, but I've always loved stories and reading and getting to do something that isn't part of normal life. So I think that was honestly where it all started, was loving to read these stories and figuring out these places and these people and just really disappearing into these things. And then that continued on, and I always had kind of some interest in theater, but it wasn't until I was in 7th grade and the high school, when I was in middle school, the high school that I would have gone to, we bounced around when I was a kid. So I lived in Illinois originally, and then Connecticut, and then after that, Texas. But when we were in Connecticut, the high school that I would have gone to if we'd stayed in Connecticut did Les Mis.
Oh, wow.
And yes. And it, even as a high school production, I'm sure if I saw a video of it now, I would have been like, oh wow, that really wasn't as good as I remember it being. But it has this perfect place in my memory of just everything, the music, the people who were playing it. It was such a good show that I just fell face first into.
That's great.
And
I
the
am of the opinion that Les Mis is always a wonderful show.
yes, yes, it's very hard to do Les Mis wrong. I have
That's
found
right.
it doesn't matter what happens or who's doing it. It's such a good story that even the material itself can stand very well on its own.
Absolutely.
And since it was a student production, I don't know if they didn't have enough men in the cast or something like that. But the person who played Javert was a woman.
Okay.
And that immediately grabbed my attention because I am very much that person that if you tell me that I can't do something, my response is watch me. So that was, seeing that you had a woman in a traditionally male role for me was just awe-inspiring. It was such a good thing for me as an impressionable kid to be like, I can do this. It doesn't matter if I'm male or female. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. There's a place that you can fit in, even if it's not what you're expecting. So that I basically jumped right into theater and started doing that.
So do you think that first performance of Les Mis, do you think it was the story that intrigued you the most and really caused you to fall in love? Because obviously it really affected you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it was more the creative or performance aspect of it, or do you think it was a kind of maybe a combination of the two? Have you thought about that?
It was definitely a combination of the two. It was
Okay.
something that the story itself just like, I immediately after finishing the show, I read the book. I want to say the version I 166 pages. I don't know why I still remember that, but I do. Um, and even reading the book was something that I started tearing up at points. Like, the literature is wonderful. The show, it translates very well onto the stage. They have such good music that goes with it. So I think it was, the story itself has a lot of power because it's about people rising up to
Right.
fight for what they believe in and to kind of keep going even in the face of adversity, which is such a timeless tale.
Oh yeah.
And then on top of that, you had it, for at least for what, 13, 14-year-old me, it was mind-blowing in terms of the staging. I remember Javert, when her suicide happened, I don't even know if it was a trap door, she just stepped right off the stage, but it was one of those where like she was there and then all of a sudden she just disappeared.
Boom.
And
Yeah.
so that caught my imagination. And
That's the magic.
so I think it was a combination of everything where I just fell in love with it, with every bit of it.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, and I was an avid reader as well as a child,
Mm-hmm.
and I often have thought about, before I discovered theater, it was almost like that was the theater in my mind, and so I think a lot of translation there as well. That's great.
Yeah,
that's cool. So Les Mis captured you and drew
mm-hmm.
you in. So where do we go from there?
From there, I basically did anything theater related I could possibly get my hands on. There was a summer and after school program that I ended up doing in New Haven, and the director, her name was Joan McAfee, and so I was a pain as a child, and I did not. Oh no! I was perfect. I was an angel. My punishment was taking books away. I was obviously I was a pain. My parents had to deal with other things besides me acting out, and I hit my teenage years very early, and that coincided when we moved from Illinois to Connecticut, and I did not want to move. Had no desire to leave, and my parents credit Joan with the first time I actually smiled when I was in Connecticut. That was the point in time where I actually decided to kind of open up and become a part of life there. And I did, at that point I was interested in acting. So they would be like little shows, and there were a couple that like Joan wrote herself that we would put on and things like that. And just basically anything that I could do related to theater. I decided to go in whole hog. And then at that point, we ended up moving from Connecticut down to San Antonio. So from there, it was stepping into a new school, new state, new city, all of the above, and getting into the theater program there. And that was where I ended up starting to do more with the technical side of things, because as a freshman girl, they've never met me. They don't know me. I'm a dime a dozen in any high school theater department. And so my sister and I, we both did theater, and we got to the point where we didn't get cast in one of the shows, but we still really wanted to be involved. And the director was like, okay, well, we need someone to run lights. We need someone to run sound. So you guys pick. And my sister, she was older. She got to pick first, and she picked lighting. And it was that kind of fluke that just set me up into sound. And it was something that for the first show that we did 3 plays in a year and then a musical. So for the plays, it was something like cue up the CD player, play this background music, play the owl hoot, that kind of thing. And then for the musicals, my freshman and sophomore year, I mixed the musicals. I had no idea what I was doing. So it was very much our technical director being like, okay, you plug in all the mics here. This is the mute button. This kind of adjust volume. Cool. I've got 3 million other things I need to do. So figure it out.
Just figure it out, make it happen. You know,
yeah.
It's interesting. One of the recurring themes, we've had several audio engineers, audio technicians on our show. And one of the recurring themes is that a lot of them started doing sound because nobody else wanted to. There was nobody else available. And they were just a body around. And somebody said, hey, go stand at that board and start pushing buttons and figure it out. Why do you think that is? I've been trying to puzzle it out. Do you got any theories?
I think a lot of it is because sound itself is a very new thing, which means like the past couple decades.
Right.
But it's not a tangible thing. You can't see the light hitting a person. You can't see what the set is. So a lot of people don't understand it. So it ends up in a lot of cases being an afterthought, even though it is a very important part of the show. But that's how a lot of people just fall into it, because they're like, we don't have anyone who knows how to do this. Learn, have fun, go for it. So yeah, I think that's very much that nobody knows that it's a thing, so nobody knows to actually initially pursue it until they fall into it.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of fear involved as well, because, it's that thing that nobody ever thinks about the sound person until there's a problem, and then everybody stares.
Oh yeah.
And especially when you're in junior high, right? Or a freshman, you don't want people staring. That's a bad thing. That's a bad thing.
Nobody knows what we do, but everybody knows that we're in the back of the house if something goes wrong. So no matter what it is, you see everybody turn around and look at the back, and you're like, not me. Set piece, not me.
Not my fault.
Yeah. And it's even in movies, it's to signal that sound is happening. They do feedback or something before they show a mic and things like that. And it's just ingrained in us that to acknowledge that there is sound, there has to be some kind of problem or something that happens.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, a lot of us joke that everyone has 2 jobs, theirs and sounds. So.
Truth.
But yeah.
That's good.
So starting to do sound, and that just kind of took off. I still had some interest in acting, but I realized that was not something that I wanted to pursue in a career. So I had my couple little cameo parts. The biggest one was I was the Wicked Witch when we did Wizard of Oz. So, nice. And that was also when Wicked was a huge thing back then. So that was half of the girls were like, I want to be Elphaba. And it's like, not in this show. Yeah, this one, you're green. That's where the similarity is less. So that was a lot of fun, because I essentially had the entire chorus at my disposal, because you had winkies, monkeys, trees, whatever. So, but also at that point in time, I realized I got really bored sitting backstage, because the witch kind of pops in for a couple scenes and then leaves, and it's still a big part, but you have a lot of downtime. And even then I was like, does anybody need help with a scene change? I'm in high-heeled boots, but I can still do it. Like, we can make this happen. So I kept, even as I did some acting and things like that, I kept kind of going back to doing the tech part of it. And when I got my first job, it was at the SeaWorld San Antonio Park as an audio op. And so that was just kind of continuing on. They needed audio people, and that was what I did. So just kept going with it, and it was a lot of fun. You got to do a lot of stuff with sound effects. I worked on a pet show that had dogs and cats, and it had everything: emus, macaws, doves, like you name it. They had tossed it out on stage, and it did a run across at some point.
And that was still high school?
Yes, that was still high school. That was high school, and then my first year, summer or two, when I was in college, I think, something like that.
Cool. That sounds like a fun job. I've been there. That's a fun place.
Yes, it is a lot of fun. And I credit it very much with, I have a very good sense of timing now for sound effects, partly because of that, because you had
I bet
upwards of 100 sound effects within a 30-minute show. So that's one of those things where it makes it a whole lot easier for me now because I have a decent sense of timing, and I credit it very much with that. That's
awesome.
But yeah. So at that point, once I got to my senior year, that's when everyone starts doing the whole like, hey, what you gonna do with your life now? And just in that theme kind of kept going. It's like, well, I like doing sound. People think I'm good. So let's continue on with sound.
Do that. Yeah.
And I met, I think most states have it, but we had the Thespian Society. So we had the Texas Thespians Festival for high school, and you can go there as a technician and present a portfolio, which I still honestly have no idea really how you do a portfolio for sound, but it had a lot of pictures of what I'd done and a lot of lists of the equipment that I'd used. And I met the professor for Penn State, Curtis Craig, there, and we ended up chatting, and he just has this big old jolly personality. And it was just like, yeah, you should totally come and check it out. And it was like, yes, I will. That sounds great. Okay. And also at that point, so kind of in line with people falling into sound and not really knowing that it exists, there weren't a whole lot of programs that were specifically for sound, or that within a technical theater you could emphasize within sound. So Penn State was it was the only school that I applied to that actually had that emphasis, because as I continued looking at the schools that I applied to, they had theater programs and technical theater programs, but Penn State ended up being the only one that I looked at with an actual sound emphasis. So that made it the natural choice to go there. And I had almost zero technical knowledge when I stepped into that school. My joke is that I didn't know what an XLR was called. And that's, for anyone who knows anything about sound, that's a very basic cable that I should have known the name of.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I was starting. I was literally coming in on the ground floor and learning everything from there. I had a decent set of ears, but I had no idea what to do with it. And then Curtis has a good way of kind of taking the students within the program as well as himself and kind of helping the students mentor the underclassmen as well as him teaching. So it ends up being a really good environment that you can learn a lot. So that helped me a lot. And it was something where I'm not technically minded. So I don't remember model numbers and specs and things like that unless I've worked with the gear for a fair amount of time.
Right.
So that was helpful for me, because Curtis's general philosophy was that you start on either kind of the artistic side of the spectrum or the technical side of the spectrum, and his job is to help bring you a little bit closer to center, to give you a little bit more medium. Yeah. To be like, you might not actually really have a lot of technical skills, but you can at least speak intelligently about it and you have an idea what's going on. And then on the technical side, that you can talk with an artistic person and kind of figure out what their language is, right. But you might be stronger in figuring out gear and things like that.
Right.
So I definitely fall on the more artistic side of the spectrum. I say that I'm a theater person that does sound, and you have some people who are sound people that do theater. Like, they'd be happy to go off and do concerts or things like that. But for me, I very much, I like having a story that I can see day after day, so that's what really draws me to theater.
Awesome.
But yeah. Continuing on. So college, you did a little bit of everything in college. You designed a little bit, you mixed a little bit, you were an A2, and you kind of started at the bottom with either like A2 or just helping in the shop and things like that. And as you learned more, you started doing bigger projects and better roles. I found I hate designing. I didn't have a lot of good experiences designing, so maybe now that I know more, I might like it better. But in school, it was any of the shows, even if I had a good time on the show, I still had no desire to design. It was, and then you deal with the personalities with directors and things like that. And it was just like, nah, that's not my thing. But I really enjoyed mixing. No, not my bag at all.
Quick question, and I haven't thought about this till now. So the actual terms A1, A2, did you begin to use those in college? Is that where you learned those?
Yes, that's kind of where you started. And so kind of the overall jobs are like you have a sound designer, a sound assistant or associate, you have a production audio, which when I was in college, we called it a lead sound, but kind of since we've left and people have gone back and been like, nobody calls it a lead sound, that's a production audio. Like, okay, that's what you want to call it now. And then you have an A1 and an A2. So the A1 usually mixes the show, and then the A2 is usually backstage doing any mic swaps, maintenance, taking care of all the equipment backstage for the show.
Yeah, swapping out on actors if PAX goes down.
Yep. It's you have to enjoy that kind of stress, which I found that was not entirely my thing, but some people are very, very good at it.
Yeah, I know Renee Levine that yes. I believe you've worked with. She loves that, right? I mean, to the point that she doesn't just love that, she loves it so much that she's now subbing multiple shows on Broadway and knows all of those tracks. I don't know if my brain can handle that.
You have to have good paperwork. Yeah. And especially like you have multiple subs who are mixing shows on Broadway, so they have to have multiple shows in their head that they can go back and forth between. And it's definitely a mental exercise.
Yeah. Well, that's cool though, because it does allow people who are of different personality types and different to find their niche even within the niche, right? Absolutely. That's great. That's cool. Cool.
So at that point, going through college and all of that, once I graduated a semester early, so I ended up leaving in December, and I knew that I wanted to go out on tour, but most tours don't actually hire and go out until late summer, early fall. So I had a couple months where I was just gonna kind of figure things out. And at that point, my family was in Dallas. So I freelanced around Dallas a little bit. I did a couple small little community theater projects. My very first show out of college was Avenue Q, which I kind of enjoy the symbolism of that. And it's just a good show to start out on, because that's exactly what the theme of it is.
Definitely an interesting and fun show.
Yes. My parents did not go to see that one. I'm not that sad about it.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I did a lot of odd jobs, basically, to kind of piece together a career. I was a stagehand at a university theater that's over here in Arlington. And that was one of those that when they hired me, another situation of people don't really have enough audio people. When I applied for the job, the guy who interviewed me was very technical and asking me a lot of very specific questions that I kind of had to sit there and be like, I don't know what the answer to that is. Like, I know the theory behind it, but I don't know what the exact answer to the question is. And they basically hired me because the stage manager who brought my resume to the guy was like, we need a sound person. She's a sound person. She's got a decent background. Just hire her. And so thankfully it worked out.
Yes, she's breathing and she knows where the power switch is.
Yeah, she's breathing. She can carry a cable. Everything else will be fine. But yeah, and that ended up working out because I'm far better in practical application than I am in an interview. So once I actually got into it, they were fine with me. But
awesome.
So yeah, I was doing a lot of those things. And then I ended up going to New York to mix the NYMF Festival. They have multiple venues with multiple A1s. And I think...
And that's the New York Musical Festival?
Yes, yes. And that was, I don't think it was that year. I think it might have been the year after. That was actually where I met Renee, where she was an A2 in one of the venues and I was an A1. And it was a lot of fun because you got to work on new shows that they're not polished and they're still working on them. So there's a little bit more of a collaborative environment just between the actors and the designers and the director and everything. And I love sitting there and listening to notes and kind of figuring out what the background is behind a show and what the story that they're going for. And so you get a little bit more of that with a show that's just getting on its feet. And you have a wide range of shows. There were some that were not that great. There were some that I would like to see continue on. But
Yeah,
yeah,
because NIMF is kind of known for new musicals, right? It's a place to be
yes.
able to get in and kind of get things discovered,
Yeah.
and yeah.
I think they typically have to come with a fully formed show, but it's something where it might not have been performed anywhere before. So you get a wide range. One of them, it was basically like Willy Wonka, but it was New Year's Eve Y2K in a drug club. And
What?
that's kind of the general reaction to the show in itself.
It would
Um,
have only been better if it were puppets like Avenue Q.
Almost, yeah. I don't remember any of the other songs, but there was one called Ketamine Dream that was actually a lot of fun.
Wow.
Yeah. But the poor actor sweat out his mic every single time, no matter what the A2 did. But yeah, it was one of those shows where you're like, I have no idea what's going on, but sure, I'll mix it. Okay, cool. You do your thing, I'll do mine.
Job.
Yeah. And then at that point, I ended up getting an offer to go on tour. So it was a little bit of Penn State connections that ended up getting me on there because a Penn Stater Justin, he was a senior when I was a freshman. He was on the Billy Elliot tour and he ended up leaving to get off the road. And then another Penn Stater, Josh, who he was a junior when I was a freshman, and he was my mentor throughout most of college. And we actually dated for 7 years. We started dating in college and then dated for quite a bit on the road before we ended up going our separate ways. And so he took over the job as the A1, and then the A2 decided to leave. And they found that for Billy Elliot, since it has a very large child cast, they actually would prefer to have a female A2 on the tour because they ran into problems in theaters where they would have stagehands who, in sound, it's usually men, and they would have to say, we can't have you on the show because there's some cues that involve you going into like preteen, like 8 to 13-year-old girls' dressing rooms when they are in like not even a leotard and tights. Like you sit there, hold tap mics at their ankles while they are in underwear, and they pull their tights up. So that's one of those where they're
that's
like,
not going to happen.
yeah, that was one of those where they're like, no. And you had some guys who would be like, I can do the track, it's fine. And then you would tell them that cue, and then they're like, oh no, okay, I'm good.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that ended up working out because I had been talking with the production manager, so they had my resume, and then obviously I had Josh's recommendation because he had worked with me in college and knew what I could do. So, and also on tour, production managers, don't want to say they try, but if they can keep a couple on the road together, they typically will, just because if they function well and can work without having all out fits on stage, then they're typically happier if they're touring together. So that ended up being another bonus as well. But so
Nice.
I got that job largely because I was female, and that's one of the odd times that I actually worked in my favor.
Yeah, awesome. And that kind of leads to my next question then. Is that something are there a lot of females? I know we've spoken to a couple. Are we just lucky? Or is there a need for more? You know, if there's a young lady out there
always
listening.
a need for more. There's always a need for more. And there are far more now, especially now than when I started touring, and definitely before that. Audio was very much a guy thing for a very long time. And that's something where theater itself has kind of been a male-oriented thing. Besides wardrobe and hair, those are typically female-led departments. But carpentry, lights, audio, that kind of thing, those are very typically male-oriented. And I don't think we're that rare now, but you still even reach a point where if my A2 is male, which has happened on a couple of my more recent tours, I'll have locals who'd be like, "Oh, are you with the A2?" It's like, "Nope, I'm the head. Hi." And they'll be like, "Oh, well, sorry." And it's one of those where it's just that's what they're used to. And I honestly have a lot of people that go into that say, especially when I've had a female A2, so the entire audio department has been female, there's a lot of support from a bunch of stagehands who are like, this is awesome. We never see this. Like, this is great. We need more women in audio, which I am all for. So yeah, we're not as rare as we used to be, but we're still kind of breaking into the industry, especially in a design way. There's especially on Broadway, most of the designers are male, and women are still starting to step into that world now.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we're breaking barriers. We're doing what we can, and that's another one of those things where, right? Yeah. Good. No, that's very much another one of those things where it's like I've actually had. Thankfully, no one has said it to me because I don't think that conversation would have gone very well. But I've had other girls who have said that, like, oh, yeah, somebody said to me that, like, girls don't do audio. It's like, oh, no, they do. They absolutely do.
Absolutely.
So
watch.
Yeah. Exactly. It's that watch me do this. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's always my general reaction to people telling me what I can't do. So that served me very well in this industry.
I'll remember that just in case there's someday I need something really well done. I'll say, Heather, you can't do this.
And I will do my level best to prove you right.
Yeah, you can't make me $1 million.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll work on that. But yeah, no,
just kidding.
It's the fine line because I can't know you're trying to manipulate me, but
that's true.
But yeah,
all right,
but
fine.
Yeah.
So well, awesome. Well, so you're on Billy Elliot, and that was the first tour. Is that right? That was the first big tour.
Yes, that was my first tour. And then Josh and I toured as A1 and A2 team for the next couple years. We did Billy Elliot together, and then we did Wizard of Oz. And then he ended up moving over to Phantom for a hot second as the A2, and I ended up going to a different tour on Annie. And then through a very tragic event, the A1 on Phantom passed away.
Oh, no.
And yes, so it doesn't happen very often on tour, but it's never an easy situation because it rocks the entire company because no one ever expects it, and it's a death in the family, essentially. Yeah, so
you can't really take time to mourn. I'd never thought about that.
Yeah.
God, the show must go on. I mean, the audience.
Yeah.
You don't want to be crass. They don't really care. I mean,
they don't know what's going on. They're there to see a show. So that ended up being where the design team that worked on Phantom was the same one that had done Wizard of Oz. So that was Mick Potter was the designer. He does a lot of the Andrew Lloyd Webber and Cameron McIntosh shows. So they had known Josh from Wizard of Oz, so they moved him. That was why he moved over to Phantom. And then when this sudden and unfortunate vacancy happened, Josh ended up moving up to be the A1 on Phantom. And then since they knew that we worked well together and they had already worked with me on Wizard of Oz, they ended up bringing me over onto Phantom as well to take over as the A2. So that was a whole flurry of on Annie being like, hey guys, so this is happening. And thankfully everyone, that's the good thing about theater, is that everyone kind of bands together, even if it's not the show that you're on. There's the theater world is so small that it's still a tragedy in the theater family. And so everyone was great, and we figured out a way for me to finish out whatever training I needed to do for my replacement on Annie and then move over to Phantom. So I will say I find that very important, is to try to leave a show properly so that you don't just be like, I'm done with this piece, I'm out, toodles.
Well, because again, like you said, it's a small community and people will remember that, and you want to be hireable.
Yes. So thankfully I left on good terms, and everyone kind of understood that this was a very, very random and rare and unfortunate situation. But then Josh and I, we spent 2 years on Phantom. And so this entire time I was an A2, and I've realized since then, I don't really enjoy being an A2. It's not something that fits very well in my skill set because I'm a good mix cover. And that's also part of being an A2's job, is that you have to mix a couple shows during the week so the A1 can do paperwork, can note you. If anything happened to the A1 in like those unfortunate events, the A2 has to be able to step in and mix. And so I was good in that aspect, but since I'm not a technical person running around and fixing things backstage, it's also not a stress I enjoy. But it took me a little bit longer to figure out things and do stuff like that, which was very frustrating for me.
Right.
Thankfully, my crews have always been wonderful. And I have a general theory that you can only be as unpleasant to work with as you are talented at your job. So thankfully, I was pleasant to work with, but I left a little bit to be desired in terms of fixing problems quickly, but they all knew that I was trying and I would get it done, and they might just have to be a little patient with me. So
That's a
thankfully,
great theory.
yeah. Yes.
So if you're going to be a jerk, you better be the best in the world.
You better be awesome at your job. And it's one of those where people have to be able to say, like, oh, he's such a pain. But I get it. He's really good at his job. I get why they hired him. Yeah. So.
But, you know, in my experience, even then, sometimes it's just not worth it. I don't have to have the best.
No, absolutely. Sometimes it's like, I'll take the person who's a step down in talent, but who's far nicer to work with. That's kind of what I've worked for. Like, I want to be really good at my job and really nice. So we want the best of both worlds.
Absolutely. Be that person, listener. Be that person. Be the best at it and be the nicest. Yes, and just make everybody wish they were you.
Right? Yeah. That's what you want to do. Yes, be the envy of all.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so I found that it wasn't really something I enjoyed being an A2. And I kind of got stuck in this loop of feeling like I wasn't really good at my job. So I would be like, well, I'm not good at my job, so I should probably find something else. But I don't know what else I would be good at, so I should probably just stick here. But I suck at my job, so I should find something else. And it's just this vicious loop that plays in your head. And so I reached a point where I honestly wasn't really happy doing what I was doing. I loved the people. I still love the show. I really enjoyed mixing the shows. But I realized that I had kind of reached a point where I didn't want to continue my career as an A2 because that wasn't something I enjoyed. And also at that point, so since Les Mis is a Cameron Mackintosh show, it had the same design team that was also on Phantom. And Les Mis announced that it was going to be going out on tour in a couple years. And so at that point, Les Mis is my show. That was going to be mine.
I was going to say, we know those ears perked up.
Yes,
what? Excuse me?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was kind of the final kick that I needed to be like, okay, I want this show and I don't want it as the A2. I want it as the A1. I want to be the mixer. I want it to be my show.
Right.
So that was the final kick that got me into, okay, I'm going to take out a show as an A1. And so emailed the production manager, was like, hey, I'd like to take out a show as an A1. And thankfully, like, he emailed me back almost immediately, was like, I think that's a great idea. And so you have just like little confidence boost there about like, he could have just been like, okay, cool. But just that little bit of like, yes, I think that's a good idea. We'd like to have you do that.
Was that because you felt, I mean, you obviously, in order to get Les Mis when it was available, you needed that experience? Is that it?
Yes. Yes, that was definitely part of it. Yeah. It was something that I knew I could probably mix the show well enough because after 2 years on Phantom, I knew what the aesthetic of the designer was, and it was the same director as well. So you're like, okay, I can follow. I can do the mixing part of it, but moving the show is a completely different thing because you have to know how to put the show together, how to adjust it for every single theater you go into, how to run a crew. And so those were the things I did not have experience with. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to take out a show the size of Les Mis, I need this experience because nobody wants that to be their first step into running a department as an A1.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So that's how most things go, is that you kind of start at smaller shows that aren't quite as risky per se, because on the level of Phantom in those shows, they're huge, because so most of the shows that I've done before had been 6 or 7 53 foot semi trucks, but Phantom was 20 trucks.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's an incredible step up because you have a Broadway style set that is coming to a theater that takes multiple days to load in. And you also have a lot more pressure because you have directors come to see it more often. Cameron Mackintosh and Andrew Lloyd Webber show up every so often. And so all of that has its own stress level because they are expecting a very high quality product and you have to be able to deliver that.
So let me get that, what you just said. So Cameron and Andrew, my good buddies,
Absolutely.
they show up to hear you mix.
Not just to hear us mix,
right,
thankfully.
absolutely.
They're there to look at the whole show. But it's they know that you're mixing. Yes, they typically will sit out in the house. They'll either get seats that are in the actual house, or when Cameron Mackintosh came to visit, he was actually sitting right by the soundboard. And poor Josh for this one, he had probably been the A1 on Phantom for maybe, I think, a month or two, and the associate designer, Adam, he had come in for the Cameron visit to make sure that everything was okay because no one from design had been there to visit since Josh had taken over. So that was kind of his first time to make sure that design was happy with the mix. And that's also happening while Cameron Mackintosh is sitting next to you being like, a bit more vocals. Do this, do that. Yeah.
So do you get warning when that happens, or they just show up?
You get a little bit of warning. Usually there might not be a whole lot of warning, but usually the company manager or someone has to arrange travel, so there's at least rumor, and you usually have maybe a day or so of notice before that happens.
Wow, that's huge. I mean, wow.
Yeah. There was, I know that, yes, absolutely. And I know that Andrew came to visit at one point, and I think they had maybe a couple days worth of notice because someone had mentioned it in passing to the design team in London, and they'd been like, "Oh, you're joking. Oh, you're not." And then Mick had told Adam, he's like, "You need to get a flight out there now." So sometimes it doesn't happen until the last minute, but then other times it's like, "Oh, they're coming. Like, this has been a plan." Right. When Cameron came to visit, we also had the principal contracts were up, so we had a new Phantom, Christine, and Raul. So he was kind of there to see them for their first, I think, week or two of performances. So sometimes it's a little bit more planned out. Other times it's just like, oh, hey, they're here. Don't suck. Have fun. But yeah, so thankfully I knew how to operate under that kind of pressure, so that wasn't a big deal to try to do a show like Les Mis, but it was just the logistics of moving a show. And so I took out Dirty Dancing, which it was actually a perfect show for me to take out. It was year 3. We did a little bit of tech, but actually the A1 on Dirty Dancing and me as the A2 on Phantom, we just swapped places. So we kind of just handed each other flash drives of information for the respective shows and said, cool, have fun.
That works.
But it worked out well because we did a lot of split weeks, which means that you do 2 cities in a week. So you would do like Tuesday, Wednesday in one city, and then travel to the next city on Thursday, and then do Friday, Saturday, Sunday in another city. So you get a ton of time moving the show and getting everything figured out, which is always a good thing and was very good for me to just learn how to move a show.
Yeah, and Phantom would not be that, right? Didn't you kind of plan for several weeks in a city?
Yes. Yeah. And that's something where a lot more planning has to go into it because at least for sound, you have surrounds, you've got delay packages. There's far more things that you can do because you have more time to load in because it is a big show. And so when I said 20 trucks before, 16 only make it to a venue because you have there's 2 sets of 4 trucks and they essentially leapfrog. So you would have, if you're in city 1 on one week, when you load out, you'll put everything into that, and then truck A is going to go from city 1 to city 3 so that it's ready to be there when the advance gets there eventually. But then you have the B package that's going to city 2 that as the show-to-show crew is loading the show out, the advance crew is already loading that advance package in. So you have that kind of, they skip along so that you always have something for the advance crew to be working on while the show is loading out the other side of the package. Kind of
leapfrogging.
So, yes.
Interesting. So that's the first time that we've talked about that. And so is there... when a stagehand is hired, there is a whole crew that's all they do is kind of the advanced stuff.
Yeah, on Phantom we had an advanced carpenter, an advanced rigger, two advanced carpenters. I'm sorry, an advanced rigger, advanced electrician, audio. Oh, I'm sorry. The carpenters were actually advanced carpenter, advanced automation, advanced rigging. So
Gotcha.
you've got they'll basically get things started. Like they'll get the motors up in the air. They will get cables run. We had two sets of the deck that the show lives on. So they would build the deck in the city as the other deck was being taken apart in the previous city. So you have duplicates of some set pieces, and then it's a lot of getting infrastructure in and ready to go. So you have, I know that I want to say Aladdin has, I think it was a week of pre-rig and advance because they have the entire super grid to do the flying carpet. And so it just depends on the size of the show and the bits and pieces that have to happen to actually get it up and running.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so that in itself is an additional logistical layer because you have to figure out, okay, we need to take X amount of things, especially for speakers, for surrounds and stuff like that. We have to take X amount of things from this package to go to that package. And Josh is very good at logistics, and so he taught me to be very good about planning venues ahead of time, making sure that I knew what was going on, keeping a record of what I needed to do and what had to switch. So he definitely in himself set me up for success to move on to doing my own shows as an A1 because he had that very practical, logical sense of this is what I need, this is what's set up, and so he had me set down a very, very good framework to send me out then to be an A1 on my own.
That's great. That's great. And another nice thing, I guess, logistically is if you have a piece of equipment goes down or something like that and there's a double, then you've got that to draw from.
Yes. So on every show, you usually have a couple cases worth of spare cable as well as racks of spare gear so that theoretically you could either work around or replace something until the shop can get you an actual replacement or you can figure out what's actually wrong with something. So
gotcha.
We should have everything covered.
Nice.
But yeah, so at that point, so going through Dirty Dancing, I ended up at the end of the tour, or well, towards the end of the tour. They usually at the end of spring they start figuring out what the staffing is for the next year, and so it worked out that between the design team for Les Mis, knowing me from the previous shows that I had done with them, and also I'm sure Josh put in a good word for me because he had heard me mix. He knew more about how I worked on the road, so he would be a more reliable resource for design to kind of be like, can she actually handle this? So with kind of all those things combined, and they knew I was not shy about telling them that I really, really wanted that show. So they knew from the get-go that I wanted that a lot.
I was going to say, I could see you every chance you've got, every person that might have some influence in that. Maybe you drop those into the conversation, right?
Oh no, that was one of those where it was just like, I would like to do this. What do you need from me? What can I possibly do to make myself more marketable and to get me a better chance to get this? Absolutely 100% every step of the way.
That's awesome.
But yeah, and so I did get the job. I did the biggest, happiest dance you have ever seen on the face of the planet when I found that out.
Yeah.
And so then the next year, or that fall, went out and did Les Mis as the A1, and it was fantastic. Every single time, usually like stagehands end up at the bar just kind of sitting and chit-chatting, and every once in a while it pops up with the question about like, if you could go back and do any show, what would you do? And before Les Mis I had been kind of like, I liked all of them, but once I did Les Mis was like, this one, absolutely this one. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and that's Les Mis is it, man. That's Jean Valjean is my last my last bucket list role. So if there's anybody watching that has the influence to get me there, just like Heather let everybody know, I'll go wherever. Oh yeah, I'm ready.
Absolutely.
Ready to hit stage.
Put it out there. See what happens. Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a very special show because it was one of those rare times where it seems like everyone knows that they're working on something special. The crew was completely committed to making it as good as they could. The cast was on point. The creative team was there. Everyone from top to bottom was ready to make it the best they possibly could. So there was just a lot of magic from start to finish. And that, I would say Les Mis was kind of where I finally really settled into getting into mixing a show. And I had done a lot of the groundwork on Phantom and kind of learning what the basics were and how to do all that. But Les Mis was kind of the time where everything finally came together, and just I could mix that show every single night and never get tired of it.
Well, I was going to say it's probably a good one for you because you knew it already. You knew every line, right?
Yes.
You didn't have to learn it like you would a new show.
Yeah, they had a couple of changes, and actually, so Mick Potter, it's designers can't, or I would assume try not to stipulate that you either have to or have to not be off book, but Mick very strongly suggests that he prefers you to be off script as fast as you possibly can.
Right.
And so that's for, I think, basically since Phantom, all the shows that I've learned, it has been with the intention of getting off book as quickly as possible. So usually within about, I would say probably 2 weeks to a month after tech, I can get rid of my script, and that also helps you focus more on the show and be able to pay attention to what's going on. And it helps when you walk into tech knowing the show, because then the designer can focus on other things other than having to babysit you and make sure that you know what's going on. If they know that you've got a good handle on it, they can take care of all the stuff that they need to do. And so it makes your job easier in the long run.
Yeah, it's very much like an actor showing up knowing their lines already, so then they can actually have character development. You're doing the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, and it was also a lot of fun because I really got to kind of delve into the story and be like, oh, like you have this instrument here, you get this. Like at the end of Empty Chairs, there's this lovely cello moment that you could just kind of push as it went to the end, and there's a great viola moment in Stars. So it was taking my love for the show and bringing it to just another level of knowing what was going on and enjoying it even that much more. So yeah.
Now that's in my head. Thank you. Oh, my friends, don't ask me.
I'm so sorry. Sorry.
Okay, no, it's always a good thing. I don't complain about that.
Right, yeah. But yeah, and so going into Les Mis, it had been a little bit of a conversation that I knew that Saigon was going to be going out the next year, and that was something that Josh had left Phantom on tour to go be the mixer for Saigon on Broadway. So, and that was kind of that thought that if he wasn't going to take the tour out, then if I did well on Les Mis, then I would probably be the one to transition over and take the tour. Because at that point, the design team was like, okay, great. You can take this fully formed show that you figured out most of the kinks. You can pass it off to the next person. And then if we know you can tech a show well, we can take you, move you on to the next show. You can set it up, get it running, and move along with it.
Cool.
So you have all of those little bits and pieces that are working. And then, so once I was done with Les Mis, I ended up moving over to Saigon and did that for a year because it was a monster of a show. It was far bigger than anyone anticipated, even knowing that it comes with a helicopter and a Cadillac and a Liberty head and all of these things. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's the last show that I saw before quarantine. The tour came through Oklahoma, and somebody gave me tickets. That was a good morning. I got a text one morning, said, "Hey, I can't go. Do you want?" Yes, I do.
Absolutely, yes, I do.
It's a crazy show. I know as a technical director myself, I wanted to go backstage and look at the Tetris of how everything fit in. It just is crazy. So much stuff. And
there's so much stuff backstage.
So much stuff. It's nuts. And it's so cool. I mean, it's just a beautiful, beautiful set. Love. And the whole, the lighting, everything. It was just wonderful.
And it's one of those 80s golden age musicals that was just built to be big. So it feels like kind of a cheap shot because with that production you actually see the helicopter comes in on a projection and you sit there, and I remember sitting there in the audience the first time I saw it being like, you've got to be kidding me.
I did the same thing.
And then the walls open and the actual helicopter comes out and you're like, okay, we're fine. We're good. Okay. You've redeemed yourself.
Crazy. It's crazy. It's so impressive. But and I mean and what's crazy, the craziest part is it's huge. And know the hydraulics and everything it takes to control that and bring it in. And it's there for what? A matter of seconds, minutes
yeah,
at the most?
I think it's 90 seconds to 2 minutes, something like that the audience can actually see it. It's there getting prepped and ready and all that stuff long before. But yeah, that show has so many moments of this giant piece that really, really is integral to the show, but it has such a short payoff time that you're kind of like, we could do it without it, couldn't we? But then you get the thing where everyone sits and be like, really? You cheaped out with the projection? Okay, fine.
Yeah. Could have done that in my high school.
Right, yeah. It's also amazing the number of people who they've seen the show before, but they forget that the helicopter comes on in the second act. I had so many people come up to me and be like, did they cut the helicopter? Because since the show skips forward 3 years and you theoretically missed that part of it, they're like, oh, well, it's just going to continue. And it's like, no, it's coming. But they're like, no, but we passed that point. It's like, no, we can do flashbacks. It's theater. We're fine.
Did the helicopter ever mess up? I wondered that too. Yes. As a TV.
Yes, there are times where I like to say that if you do a show enough times, anything can happen. Even if it's a 1 in a million chance, you do the show 1 million times, you're gonna have that 1 in a million chance. So yeah, there were a couple times where I think it was after I left, but I want to say there was one time where they had an issue getting the helicopter into the building. We had one time where there was an issue where the deck wasn't level, so the helicopter wasn't able to get into its track correctly. So you have a bunch of little things that the carpenters and the automation tech, they'll try to mitigate as much of it as they can, but you get to a point where you might not know until the helicopter is supposed to go out, and you have to have you have to have the carpenter, the stage manager, the automation, or someone say, we have to go to plan B. Like, this is... Right.
Well, my thought was, with my luck, I'd do it all, and it would work great, and we'd get on stage, and everybody would get aboard, and then it wouldn't take off and leave, and what do we do? All right, guys, let's hike out of Vietnam. We'll catch a boat. Come on.
It's fine. Just go. Run around the helicopter and leave. It'll be fine.
Your arms. We can fly.
Yeah. We actually had, so back in high school or college, we did Altar Boys, which it's about a Christian boy band who's on stage and they're doing a concert, and they have this thing called a soul sensor, which tells you how many people need to be saved. And that's kind of the point of the show, is that they're supposed to bring the soul sensor down to 0, and then they've done their job.
Oh, wow.
And we had these random times where during tech, it wouldn't work correctly. And one of the director was just like, oh yeah, I've had this problem before on the show where if there's not enough people in the house, it won't work. It won't, because it's something where it goes from like 43 to 12 to 5 to 0, that kind of thing. But like when it's in tech and you don't have 43 people in the house, he was like, yeah, it's this really weird thing that like sometimes it won't work. Like it'll almost always work when you have an audience.
Are you sure it's that, or do you think that maybe that the people in the audience were just too evil and couldn't get saved?
That's also part of the problem. You never know.
It's because the director was that. What?
Well, but it's something like, this is during tech. Like during the show, it worked fine every single time. But you would just have during tech where the director is just like, yeah, it's kind of like, I've had it on other productions where during tech, when there's not enough physical people in the theater to have like, to justify the readout, even though it's tech, the soul sensor will just futz itself up because it, and it's just like,
really weird.
Yeah. So it's one of those like theater superstitions where you're like, I'm pretty sure some wires just got crossed, but I like your answer too. Sure, why not?
It was the ghost.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's for every single show. There's always something that'll happen, and you have to either figure it out, or that's also part of the reason why I like mixing. My A2 Mark Rivet on Les Mis, we actually had a conversation about this where I was talking about, because you have a lot of stress as a mixer, because sometimes you have big wigs who are sitting out in front of house with you, but even in a normal show, you have probably upwards of thousands of cues of getting the mics up at the right time, firing the right sound effects, all of that stuff. And if you miss a cue, everybody knows. Like an actor can ad-lib a flubbed line, but if you get a mic up late, everyone knows that they missed half the line. And for me, I enjoy that kind of stress. Like I'm able to deal with that far more easily than dealing with the stress of backstage. And Mark, we had the perfect complement of skills, because he was very good with all the technical stuff, and he was talking about, he's like, oh, I like Renee, like, I love that rush of going backstage, having just minutes to fix something and get it all together and do all that stuff. And I was like, that does not sound like fun at all to me. So like Mark is also one of those great people who, like, in a pinch, if something goes wrong, it doesn't matter what department is, he's super intelligent and can just hop right into any problem and be like, what do you need? What can I do? What can I help with? Yeah. Where I would be sitting out there being like, I've got a cable. And so I'm far better suited to being at front of house because I can react to problems with the console or things like that far faster than I react to other people's problems backstage.
That's
so
funny.
that worked out well. That it's just like perfect. You be backstage, you do what you do so well, and then I'll be out front and I can act where my strengths are. But yeah. Oh, so okay. So at this point I'm on Saigon, and just since it's such a big show, we ended up having to alter the load-in times just to be able to load it in because it was going to take far longer than anybody thought we were. So in some cities, we ended up doing overnight load-ins, which meant that we started at 9 p.m. and would work around the clock until we got to showtime the next day and then did the show. So at that point, I had maybe an hour of sleep during the lunch break, and I'm trying to mix a full 3-hour show on essentially no sleep in the past 24, 25 hours at that point.
That is crazy.
Yes, it takes a lot out of you because there would be times where, because you load in, have a show Tuesday, I would just sleep almost all day Wednesday and Thursday. And then you wake up Friday, have show Friday night, 2 show Saturday, 2 show Sunday, load it out, repeat that whole process. So whose
job is it when the tour starts to kind of estimate those times? Is that...
You have a fair amount of people. They're usually the production manager is the one who's taking care of most of it but you also have someone who's figuring out the route for the show. So you might have some venues that they're really close, so it's not going to take the trucks a whole lot of time to get from point A to point B. And you have other venues where it's clear across the country, so you'll have to start loading in a day later because the trucks won't be able to physically get there in time. Right. And then once everything goes up, you have to figure out, okay, so this is what we're actually looking at in times. And usually the first load in takes forever. And then you figure out what you're doing, you figure out a rhythm, and it gets tighter and tighter. But we reached a point with Saigon where there were so many big pieces, and I think there were some pieces that were supposed to be modified that it either didn't happen or it didn't quite work out the way that people had thought. So just putting those bits and pieces together added more time. And I want to say they started us out, they wanted us to be in 9 trucks or something like that. And then I think we ended up eventually in 11, just by the size of things and trying to fit everything in. And that then in itself is just a giant game of Tetris of trying to fit everything in. So you get very good spatial awareness as a stagehand. I will say that.
Oh, absolutely. You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there were a lot of factors that went into it being so much larger than it actually was, and you kind of make it work the best you can. But I knew pretty early on in the tour that it was going to run me down very quickly. So I reached a point where I was like, okay, I know I'll probably do a year on this and then be ready to move on to something that's not going to kill me quite this fast. And so at that point, Josh, being the mixer on Broadway, he was now the associate on the tour. And so chatted with him and was like, does Mick have anything else going out that I could potentially jump on? And he was kind of like, no, if you want something else, you're going to have to look elsewhere. So at that point, I sent out my resume. I had a friend who I actually did on a Nymph. I think it was the second summer I did Nymph, that he was the designer for one of the shows. And he and I got along really well. And he's just a really chill, easy, laid back guy. And his name's Mike Tracy. And then throughout the passing years, so I think at that point it had been maybe 5 or 6 years since I'd worked with him, and we'd seen each other maybe 2 or 3 times over the course of those 6 or 7 years. Like he was mixing war paint, so I got to stop in and see him when I was in shop prep for Les Mis and stuff like that. And so again, just I have learned I have absolutely no shame in sending out emails and being like, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while, but I have this favor / I will buy you coffee, whatever treat you want, drinks, tell me. I am happy to repay you for the favor, and I know it's kind of awkward for me to just send this right out here, but that's what we're going to do.
You got to do the hustle if you want to work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep.
And so I ended up sending my resume to him and also at that point I said like, hey, like I know we worked together a very long time ago. So if you feel comfortable, would you mind sending my resume on to Brian Ronan, who's the designer for Mean Girls? So
And a lot
send my
of other
resume.
things.
Yes, and so many other things, but that was the one that was going out on tour. So sent it to him, and then whatever happy magic happened that Brian ended up liking my resume out of the pile. So after Saigon, I moved on to Mean Girls, and we did this past fall. We did tech for it and all of that stuff. And it's scary to move because I had spent 5 years with Mick Potter and his design team and all of that, and you get very comfortable with that aesthetic. And it's a totally different style of show where it's very classical and orchestral. And moving on to Mean Girls, which is poppy and fun, and you've got a band, and I really hadn't mixed guitars or a drum kit in a very long time. So walking into that, I was definitely kind of nervous, but Ronan and his entire team was fantastic. Like they were all very much like, "Oh, you're part of the family now. Like, let us know what you need. What can we help you with?" The mixer on Broadway, Brian Shoemaker, I trained with him for a couple weeks to learn how to mix the show before we went out to tech, and he was great. He had toured. I want to say for about 10 years or so before he left the road and started mixing on Broadway. And he was very much like, let me tell you how all this stuff works. Like, this is the software. This is what you're looking for. Have you used this before? No, you haven't. Let's do a crash tutorial. So even when you're stepping into a whole new world, you can still find people who will help you. I've learned to very much be upfront with the fact that I'm like, I don't know this piece of gear. I don't know this piece of software. I'll either need time to figure it out, or if you can get someone who will help me. And then you have all these people who are just like, absolutely, I'll help you. Sure. Like what do you need to know? What's your background? Okay, we'll jump off from there. So I was very lucky in the fact that they just embraced me wholeheartedly, and it was wonderful. And then we continued out on tour and ended up in quarantine. So
how long did you guys get to tour before? When did you start?
We teched in September. So we were out for about 6 months, I think, because we stopped middle of March. But yeah, so just enough time where you're getting comfortable, you've figured out a whole lot of the kinks, you've made some adjustments to make it work better, and
Boom.
Absolute standstill.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. Yeah. Every show.
Mm-hmm.
Have you met Tina Fey? That's what everybody wants to know, right? Have you really?
Have.
Oh, yes, wow, that's cool.
To be fair, most of our interactions are like us awkwardly making eye contact as I'm trying to get around her and the people that she's talking with to do whatever I need to do for my job. So met is a relative term, but she's a surprisingly reserved person. Like, I think she enjoys what she does, but if she can kind of sit in the back and just watch things happen, she seems to be very happy. So every once in a while, like, she would pop out at front of house and just kind of like stand there and watch it. And it's one of those where you can kind of tell she doesn't really want you fawning all over her. So it's kind of like, Tina Fey's here. Awesome. I'm going to keep mixing the show.
That's cool.
But,
that's cool. Yeah, and so was that the first Brian Ronan show that you did? Because I know many Mick Potter and that crew was who you were aligned with.
Yes.
Did you do research? I mean, what did you go listen to other stuff, or was it primarily learning from the Brian Shoemaker who mixed on Broadway as far as Brian Ronan style?
Mm-hmm. It was a little bit of both. I pretty much, as soon as I get any type of hint that I might be doing a new show, I will download whatever I can find. So I was listening to the Mean Girls Broadway cast recording on repeat. And then as soon as they were like, yes, we're hiring you, I sent an email out to Brian and the associate Cody being like, great, I would like a mixing script. If you have a recording of the show, if you have a mix video, and if you have a console file. And they're like, cool, that's about 4 months out, so we've got other stuff to do. We're glad you're excited. We'll get back to you soon. And then within a couple of weeks, Brian Shoemaker sent me a Dropbox folder with all the stuff in it. But and then for that, you kind of just, for me, I just listen to it on repeat until it's as in my head as it can possibly be. And then when I got to New York, I went to see Tootsie. That was the only show that I got a chance to see, because after that, I was in the shop during the day and then at the Mean Girls show during the night learning the show. So I still haven't seen Book of Mormon. ever
Yeah,
in my theater
I
career.
haven't either.
That's
I was
yeah.
in this.
Okay,
In
that
fact,
makes me feel so much better.
I was there a year ago in New York because a student that I mentored was
Mhm.
opening on his first show off Broadway, and I told him when he did, I'd come watch. So I
Yeah,
was there, and I got to see some great shows. But that was on the
awesome.
list. I didn't win the lottery because I didn't have the.
Ah,
I didn't
yeah.
know I was going to be making this trip till the last minute, so I didn't budget
Mhm.
for tickets. You know how that
Yeah.
goes.
Hmm.
So yeah, it
Yeah.
was like I want to see it, but I don't have the money.
Yeah,
That's
that was one of the shows where I was like, just as a theater person, I feel like I should have seen this by this point in my career. And at the
yeah,
same time, it was like, I should really actually, but it's just, I never actually ended up doing that. But it's something that I did try to listen to his different kind of shows to see what his general aesthetic was. And I
right,
had some friends who had worked with him before, so it was nice that I kind of just got to pick their brain. The A2 on Mean Girls, Jess, she was great. Like we would just kind of sit there and chat, and so she was able to tell me a lot about like kind of how he worked. And everyone has their own little things about like, okay, with Brian, like you'll need to remember this. Like, okay, this is a thing that he likes to have. And
right.
so everyone was very helpful with these little tidbits. So that was always very nice when you because every once in a while you have people who is just like, this is my proprietary knowledge and I'm not going to tell you.
Absolutely.
And it can be incredibly frustrating, which sometimes you just have to deal with. But when
Yeah.
you have people who are just like, yes, I'm here to help you, like we're here to make sure that, and these people, it's like, you met me a month ago and you really don't have a whole lot of direct contact with the tour, but you're still on board. You're still, everybody was like, if you need anything, let me know. I'm happy to answer questions. If you just need to bounce an idea off of somebody. So just having that level of openness was kind of like, okay, if I run into an issue, if I run into some kind of problem, I have resources. And
Right.
that's what I've learned is what most of my job is, especially since I'm not a technical person. I have Mark that I can call and be like, I don't know what this is doing. Can you tell me how to fix this? And you're only as smart as the smartest person that you have the phone number or email address of, because they
There you
can
go.
always help you fix it.
That's right. Yeah, call a friend from Who Wants to Be a
Yes.
Millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
That and that's
Absolutely.
again one of the recurring themes we hear when we talk to people is just how wonderful the community is. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, as Tim Schmidt said, there are no secrets, right? And that's
Yeah.
what you were
Mm-hmm.
referring to is
Yeah.
it's a collective brain. As
Mm-hmm.
long as
Yeah.
somebody's going to know the answer, you just got to be nice to
Yeah.
that person. So when you ask them, they'll tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have those wonderful people who like they'll drop everything and be like, "Okay, what do you have?" And you have some people where it's like you'll ask them a question and be like, "Okay, this is a less important thing. I might need to figure this out in the next week." And you have some of those people who be like, "Okay, they'll get back to me eventually, but they're typically busy." But
Right.
then like Mark is one of those people where like I can call him and he'd be like, "I have about 2 minutes to talk, but I'm happy to help you. What do you need?"
That's great.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
Well, I want to transition real quick because we don't have a whole lot of time left, but there's an organization you are a part of, a
Yes.
blogger that I know is important to you. And
Mhm.
actually, in one of our previous episodes with Tim Schmidt that I just referenced,
Yeah.
he talked about it. And that's I'd never heard of it. And so
Mhm.
as soon as I got off of his interview and talking to Tim, I instantly Googled it and sent out an email and said, "Hey, I want to talk to somebody about this." And
Mhm.
you're one of those that we actually a couple people from the organization are going to be on the show, which is really exciting.
Awesome.
But that
Yeah.
is Sound Girls. Do they call it soundgirls.com or just Sound Girls or
Sound
.org?
Girls. Yeah, you go to
Cool.
soundgirls.org, but it's just Sound Girls.
Very good.
Okay.
Well, take a quick minute here and tell us about it, because again, I believe there's probably some girls out there who are some
Mhm.
young ladies who are interested in pursuing this, and it's a great resource
Yeah.
for them. So yeah, just make them look good. You
Yeah.
don't have to work real hard because they are good. They're doing great
Yeah.
things.
Oh yeah, I don't have to do a thing for them to look good. They're such a good organization. They started out primarily. The founders are from a rock and roll touring background, but since then they've expanded into theater and recording and kind of anything you can think of sound related. And it comes from the fact that there's not a whole lot of women in sound, so their mission is to try to get the word out that girls can be in sound and try to give members the resources to be able to learn the things that they want to do, to know that this is a career path. And they have so many amazing resources. Just, I think I have no idea how these people do it, but every day there is something new. They've done webinars with people from Broadway, with people who are touring. They did a financial one, like almost any facet that you could possibly think of. And it's something that no matter what the cause is, they are always there and ready to jump in. Like as soon as COVID hit, they had a relief fund that you could donate to so that they could help their members and anyone who needed assistance. And with all the protests happening and everything, they have an entire page of links to like articles you can read, places you can donate to, petitions you can sign. And it just within moments, they're like, great, we want to help. We want to do things. This is how you can act. This is how you can be a part of your society. This is how you can be a part of Sound Girls. And then my role in that is they have a set of blogs. And so they ask for bloggers to volunteer to do things. And you have people from every single walk of sound. You have them from concert touring, from recording, from theater. Since my background is mixing, that's what my blog is it's about mixing and kind of dealing with that side of theater and how you get it, how you put your script together, how you deal with stress, what line by line mixing is, because that's something that not a whole lot of people know of.
Yeah.
And they have a directory. So, because they found that a lot of people were like, I would love to hire women, but I don't know any. And they're like, great, we have a directory. If you want to look for a woman, we have this entire list of people with contact information and resumes and all this stuff that you can sign up and get. And so basically every single possible aspect that they can help with, they have done. They have mentorship programs where they'll pair mentors with mentees, depending on what their emphasis is or what they're looking to do. And so basically, pretty much anything that you need if you just want to figure out about sound, if you want to get into sound, if you're in sound and want to help, they're ready, willing, and able to do whatever they can. And I know Timmy Schmidt, he does shadowing sessions where people can come him and watch the show and see what they do. So for somebody who doesn't know what sound is, they can get paired up with someone who's in the city and shadow them and talk with them about what their job is and actually see what mixing a show does. So they have everything, and they're constantly coming up with new resources. If you sign up to be a member, they'll send out, I want to say it's either weekly or twice a week, they'll send out an email that's saying, this is what we're doing. Like, especially in the time of COVID, they have webinar upon webinar upon webinar of different things that they're doing. Yeah. So they have so many different things, and I'm very happy. I actually got hooked up with them because of, again, Mark. When we were on Les Mis together, he was like, my boss is awesome. She's a lady. They should do a profile on her. So they ended up doing a profile on me. And then this past year, when they sent out a request for bloggers, because kind of going back to the whole, like, I didn't really feel like I was good at my job thing. Once I transitioned into being an A1, it was a night and day difference between changing just kind of my general outlook on how I felt about my job, what I enjoyed about it. And I'd reached the point where I realized, oh, I'm actually good at my job. I know what I'm doing. Okay. And so it hit at a good moment where I was like, okay, like I think I can actually talk intelligently about this and possibly help people like me who started out having no idea what they were doing. So that hit at a good time. And since I've joined, it's one of those where I'll kind of be like, oh, hey, like this would be a cool thing. Like, do you have anything to do this? And they're always like, oh yeah, we'll sign you up for it. Okay, cool. You're interested. Great. And they already have so many different resources, but yeah, I would definitely say check out their website, especially if you are a woman who wants to do sound. Check them out. They have so many resources to help you get started, or at least send you in the right direction.
Absolutely. And I would, a little secret, guys, you can go to the website too and read and check out all the stuff. But
you do not have to be a sound girl to be on Sound Girls.
Absolutely. But if you are, it really is. It's a wonderful resource regardless, but it's great. It's great what they're doing. And I'm sure they are one of the big reasons that, earlier you said that when you first started, it was like we were breaking ground, and now there's a lot more. And they probably are, a lot of that is a direct result of the work they've done. So kudos to them. Great job, Sound Girl. Wonderful. Yeah. So, maybe down the road there will be electriciangirls.org, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Something like that.
All the girl power all the time. I am all for it.
Hey, they're needed for sure. So
Yes.
it's
Yep.
wonderful. Well, just a couple things here, and we're almost done, which is a
Mhm.
bummer. This is a great
Yeah.
time, Heather.
Oh, this has been so
But
much fun.
yeah, so one of my favorite things to do, because I am a passionate person and I love to hear people verbalize what is it about what you do that
Mhm.
fills you with passion. Why? Obviously you don't, there's times you're not getting much sleep at all. You're
Yeah.
you're putting yourself in situations that are incredibly stressful. So
Mhm.
you love this. I mean, you've got to
Yeah.
love this to be doing it day after day for year and year after year. So what is it, Heather? What is it that fills you with that fire, the passion that burns in you? Can you put that into words?
Probably, maybe not super eloquently, but for me, I love mixing a lot of because the story, because as the mixer, you have the very unique position of you're part of the show, but you're also watching the show and experiencing the show, and in the middle of the audience who's also getting to experience the show. And as a mixer, my favorite times are when everything just kind of clicks between the orchestra and the actors and the audience and you, and everything just gets into this pocket where sometimes it's just a moment in a show. There was a time on Phantom where prima donna is the managers going into prima donna is incredibly hard to mix because it's very quick lines, one right after the other. And so you're doing all of that, and then you go into prima donna, and it's all these people singing at the exact same time, and you have to pick out the person that you need one at a time. And if you do it right and you get the build right, there's a pause before they hit the final note. And there was one time where a lot of the times you'll get applause in that pause before
Mhm.
the final note, but there was one time where you just felt this electricity that in my head I had this moment where it's like it's not just going to be applause, it's going to be thunderous applause, and
Right.
I 100% know that we are going to get that. And it's when you have that moment where it just all clicks in, and
Yeah.
there's so Les Mis being one of my favorite shows, Bring Him Home had this gorgeous moment at the end where Arjan Valjean, Nick Cartel, just did a wonderful job with the character, and the his vocal range was perfect for Valjean. And you would reach a part at the end where you've had these gorgeous dynamic swells, and everybody, Nick, the orchestra, everyone brings it back to this quiet, intimate moment. And for me as a mixer, it's sometimes even more important to know when not to touch things as much as
Yeah.
it is to
Oh
know when
yeah.
to push and when to pull.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that was a moment where once you hit that last note and the orchestra and Nick, they were right in the pocket where they needed to be, I could step back from the console. And then as he held out that last note, you would just hear these little sighs in the audience. And it just those moments are electrifying. And you can't trade that for anything. I've never found
No.
anything that I've ever done in my life that has those moments of just complete satisfaction where you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, we did that. You're with us and we did that. And it's fantastic.
It's
So
addictive
yeah,
too. Yeah.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
miss mixing so much. I want to get my hands back on a mixing console so bad. I'm I'm going through withdrawal symptoms. It's really sad right
Absolutely.
now.
Oh, and that begs a question. Interest. Do you have something that you practice with? Do you do the quarters on the
Yes.
table, or do you have one of the Casecraft
I kind of hate the
submixers?
quarters on the table.
Yeah,
I've never really enjoyed doing that because they get all over the place. They're never at
they
the right
do.
spot. I actually had, he's an A1 on Broadway. His name's Scott Cooker. He made me, I told him that I wanted something that was the same dimensions as one of the consoles that I primarily mix on, the SD7 from Digico, which is the Casecraft one is also based on those dimensions. And just said, like, hey, can you this I think that was before Casecraft actually had that, and said, hey, like, do you mind making me something that has it? So you got some fiberglass, routed it out, put some like cheap faders in there, and that's something that I can sit there and for practicing, it's so much easier than quarters, and it's really indispensable because you get that actual physical feeling of moving the faders, and you can figure out like, okay, I don't have enough time to actually move my hands from this point to this point, or I can do this with one hand while I'm taking care of the band with the other hand. And I'm very disappointed because I left it in the work box when we left Mean Girls. Well, because I didn't have another show to practice for. We were only supposed to be gone for a couple weeks. I am very much regretting that I did that because, I mean, at this point, I would probably go through Saigon and Les Mis and Dirty Dancing and just mix, like, put on a recording of the show and just mix all of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I know, Brian has been a guest on our show, and I think he's wishing he's having a hard time because of all the supply chain stuff to get the materials. In fact, he said he's going to give us a couple to give away,
awesome.
Which is pretty cool. But he can't get the parts he needs to make them. And I know that was one of the thoughts was it could probably sell a lot of them right now because
everyone's just sitting waiting for something to do. Yeah.
Like, but hey, it is what it is.
Yeah. I would be lying if I hadn't thought of either talking to Scott or going on Casecraft and being like, either Scott, can you make me a new one, or can I just order one from Casecraft?
Yeah.
I miss it so much.
Yep. Totally understand that. Well, the Wall of Wisdom. Speaking of the Wall of Wisdom, it is time, Heather, for you to just drip onto us some great wisdom that I can put on a piece of gaff tape and put on the wall to live forever.
Perfect.
It's almost full, but I've got a spot. I picked a spot out here. I already pre-tore up the gaff tape. I measured it to make sure it fit.
Just make sure.
Because I don't know what I'm going to do soon. I'm going to be putting it on the walls around the wall, but that's okay.
And you can make a border and then kind of make a design from that. You'll find a way.
We'll do it. We'll make it 3D or something. I don't know.
Ooh, yeah. I like that. The 3D Wall of Wisdom.
There you go. Ooh, it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
All right. So I got my paint pen. I got a new paint pen.
Awesome.
Ready to go. Plenty of paint. So what is it going to be?
Find what makes you happy.
Ooh, find what makes. Talk to me about that. Where did that come from?
It's, for me, a lot of my journey has just been realizing what I didn't enjoy doing, and that made finding being an A1 and mixing shows so much more gratifying when I realized that this is what I enjoy. This is something that I could do, and it's. You hear a lot of people be like, oh, if you follow your passion, you'll never have to work a day in your life. Oh, no, you absolutely work. It's, you have to work hard. You have a lot to do. Just finding something that makes you happy is no guarantee of success, but it makes the 29-hour days bearable. It makes the really long, the really hard days. It makes it easier to learn about things because you're excited about it. So that's what I found, is that if I'm happy and I really like doing something, that's 99% of the battle.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100% that you're always going to work. But if you're working at something you like, then it's enjoyable nonetheless. Yeah. But it's still work. And but at least it's much better than a day of work doing something you hate.
Yeah. It's going to be a long day. I have come back with sore muscles from lowering speakers off a balcony rail, and you're going to feel it, but at the end of the day, and that's something that even after long, hard days, if you have a good show that you enjoy doing, that's very much something where you can still look at it and be proud of it and be like, okay, all of that hard work was worth it. Yeah,
absolutely. Very good. Well, I got it. Find what makes you happy, right there, Heather Augustine.
Love it.
Go right here. You'll be right by. We've been talking about Brian Judd a little bit, so you'll be right over Brian, and beside Paul Regano, and some great people, some wonderful. You're in good company right there. So,
fantastic.
Right there. Awesome. Well, one last thing. You don't have to do anything but sit there and smile, because one of the things we always are cognizant of is the fact that you are a star. You are every bit of a star as any of those actors on the stage, but you don't get to take a curtain call the way they do. At the end of the show, you're back there, and you're at least in the front of the house. You can see them, people can see you, but you don't get to go up on stage and bow, and you should. You deserve that. So right now, what you have to do is, this is suspension of disbelief. Imagine that I am all of the millions of people that are going to watch this. We hope.
Love it.
Maybe at least my mom. But no. There's more people than that. So all of those fans out there of musical theater, they're going to watch this and they're going to clap when they're done. And so I'm representative of that. And this is your curtain call. So you enjoy this, Heather. This is for you. Yes. Woo! Woo! Because you absolutely deserve that. You absolutely
love it.
I would say
thank you.
Good, but there's not room in the camper. So.
I'll take what I can get. It's fine.
Hey, absolutely. But you're a star, and thank you for being our star today. Thank you for taking the time to honor us with your presence and your story and your wisdom. And it's just been a great, great time.
Lovely. And thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy getting to do this and meeting wonderful people and making new friends. So great stuff. And speaking of wonderful people and great friends, you guys are my friends and you're all wonderful people. And this is, we do this for you. We do this for you. You know, it's our sacrifice, right? It's not really a sacrifice, but we do it for you. And so thank you for being a fan. Thank you for being a part. Thank you for being a star and helping finding your stage and helping whatever it is, whether it's sound. If nobody else wants to do it, you might love it. It might be your thing, or being on the stage or putting up the stage or whatever it is. Find your stage and be a star, because we need you. We do. We need you to help make this thing continue and into the future and be incredible. So let me thank you for that. And maybe someday you'll be on my show. You know, who knows? I would love that. But for now, what I need you to do is subscribe, like, comment, and share us with the world. So everybody can meet Heather Augustine because she deserves that and they would be better for it. So that's it. We'll see you guys next time right here on the Hidden Stars of Theater. Bye-bye, guys. Have a great day.